Okay, good afternoon, everyone. We're going to get started here. My name is John Marco. I know many of you. I'm a civil rights attorney in Detroit. My co-counsel, Scott Goodwin of Goodwin Law, is also here in the room with the families of the victims of this horrible tragedy today. I'd like to introduce you to some of the people who've been impacted by this. If starting in the front left, and you're going to hear from Mr. Vincent Gibson, who's the father of one of these young boys who was involved in this horrible tragedy, is sitting in the front left. His wife, Audrey, in the front right is Cecil. He's the grandfather of the young boy, Mr. McGee, and Lori as well is the grandmother. And you're going to hear from Vincent here shortly. I'd like you to introduce you to these wonderful young boys who are at the heart of this case. I'm going to show you a picture here of Elijah from before this horrible incident. Just a wonderful young boy who was just in the second grade at the time of this tragedy. Elijah was 8 years old at the time of this horrible tragedy. Lavelle, also only 10 years old at the time of this tragedy. I'd like to show you another picture of Elijah. And we're happy to provide these pictures at the conclusion of today. Please send me a request or an email. But these young children, like so many other children, went on essentially a field trip through a program that was offering opportunities to young aspiring engineers and young men and women who show promise in the greater Detroit areas. There was a lot children from Pontiac, a lot of children from Detroit who showed promise about being a future engineer. This program was put on, it was called the STEM program, and was put on through an agency called the Detroit Area Pre-College Engineering Program, which worked in conjunction with Continental Automotive Systems Incorporated, which has a corporate offices in Auburn Hills, Michigan, along with a test track. Now, Ford Continental, as I'll refer to them throughout this press conference, is one of the largest tire manufacturers in the world, but they don't just make tires. They also do testing on components. They do stability control systems. They do all kinds of other things. And they had an agreement with Ford Motor Company where Ford Motor Company lent Continental a prototype known as a Mustang Dark Horse prototype that was being used on the date of this incident on July 17th of 2023. This is an extremely powerful vehicle. This is not a vehicle that you're going to find on the streets. It's a prototype race car, extremely high horsepower, experimental prototype. As part of this program, they invited these young children out to the Continental test track and the Continental facility in order to essentially put on a show for them. And I'm going to show you pictures of this test track and what Continental did in this case. So this is an actual part of the Continental, and you can see on the left side here, the Continental offices. This is the aftermath of this horrible incident. This vehicle was driven by a young man who my understanding had just graduated college, by the name of Linus Gugino. This is the test track, and I sent video out earlier today, but you're going to see video from the perspective of the children, actual video at the time But what Continental and the other defendants did as part of this program, they thought that it was going to be a good idea to put all these little children who are there for this field trip and to observe as part of this program in this tent on the left side, directly next to this high-speed test track without any protections whatsoever. And as you can see, there's a tiny guardrail there that is similar to a guardrail that you would see on the side of the highway, offering virtually no protection whatsoever. Here's the license plate of the vehicle. Here's another view of this test track. And so these young children were placed directly next to this high-speed test track. And as you can see on the cell phone video, the driver, Mr. Gugino, was then instructed to do several high-speed passes in close proximity to these little children who were there observing the event without any protection whatsoever. And you can see on the video that I'm going to show you, and the video was taken by one of the children. Lavelle actually took the video on his cell phone, and these children were very excited to be part of this program and to be on this field trip, to be able to experience what should have been a pleasant, wonderful day, a memorable day that would solidify in their minds this idea of, I want to be an engineer when I grow up. I want to do what Ford does and what Continental does. And these children were placed right next to the track, and they had Mr. Gugino do several high-speed passes with this prototype vehicle. And they had him go so fast so that it would be exciting for the children. And they had him lose control in front of the children, directly in front of the children. And the predictable happened. When you take a high-speed prototype race car and you race it right next to little kids, and you have your driver lose control on purpose to make it exciting, something bad is going to happen. And the worst imaginable nightmare for these families and these children happened on that day, when this vehicle lost control predictably and literally crashed into these little kids standing on the side of the racetrack, which is exactly where Continental and the other defendants had set up this event and instructed them to stand. And I'm going to show this video. I'm not going to show the entire video. It's very long and it's very emotional. But this is a video that was taken from Lavelle to document what was supposed to be a wonderful day.
Go.
That's all the driver can steering. All of our team. They will actually
Traction control on.
so now he's flooring it.
So he's flooring it, but it's modulating how much power it's giving to the wheels, so that way he's not spinning out or just overly spinning the wheels.
Go fast.
Yeah. I think you want to be in the car with the safety system.
There we go. Hey, let's go. Hey. That's what I wanted.
Yeah, that's how my
That is what I waited for.
Wait, is he gonna go again?
I smell that too.
He stinks. I know.
Spinning a lot more.
The tire rubber. Oh, here we go.
Without the safety system.
Perfect.
Oh, he's about to speed up without the safety.
You can see his tires spinning more than his car's actually moving.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I want to get a Mustang now.
Kinda,
I've always wanted one, but still.
kinda lame.
Now I want to drive that thing though.
Do you see how it's kind of like not going as...
Hey, he's about to go. Bro, that's it.
The video goes on for another half an hour at least, documenting the horrible pain, suffering, and screams of these children as their loved ones were in the area. And it is indescribable what's captured on the rest of that video and audio recording from Lavelle's cell phone, which had been knocked out of his hand and was literally on the ground still recording the events. We also have obtained other views from the security cameras of Continental's facility, which will be released as well. The damage to these children is indescribable and absolutely horrible. Elijah suffered a fractured skull with an actual hemorrhaging and bleeding of the brain, with a traumatic brain injury. His life has been upended and devastated, along with that of his family. He suffers from constant headaches, problems from a TBI, post-traumatic stress disorder from a second grader. This is for a second grader that was supposed to be on a field trip. I've attached, there's other injuries. He had fractures of his bones. He has chronic pain. He has all kind of injuries. He had to have screws and rods put into his extremities that we've attached a photo of his foot from what occurred. This is a picture of one of the boys at the hospital. The immediate injuries were horrible. I have additional photos that we provided that I can show you as well. The boys had to be rushed to the emergency room to be given critical care from the scene. And we're frankly lucky that additional children were not killed. We're lucky that these children were not killed, but that additional children who were all congregated right exactly where this car flipped over and blew into that guardrail and crushed their bodies, that there wasn't additional children that were hurt or injured. Here's another picture of Elijah following his release from the hospital. Needless to say, they're going to suffer with these injuries for the rest of their lives. Their parents and their family unit is going to suffer from these injuries for the rest of their lives. And the effects are going to ripple through the generations for these kids. And you're going to hear, and as part of our case, these kids went from being top of their class overachievers to be able to get into this program and to be future engineers, to struggling with some of the most basic things, to struggling with being able to leave the house, to struggling to be able to get into a car, struggling to be able to live just any type of normal life. The lives of these young children and their families have been changed forever for the worse due to the negligence and carelessness of the defendants in this case, which is why it's my honor, along with Mr. Goodwin and his office, to represent these children and their families in the lawsuit that was filed today in Oakland County Circuit Court before the Honorable David Cohen. 3 separate lawsuits were filed. The first one being on behalf of Lavelle and through his family. The second being brought on behalf of Elijah and through the Gibson family. And the third being on behalf of Mr. Gibson individually, Mr. Vincent Gibson, who was at the scene and had any parent's worst nightmare, worst imaginable nightmare, to hear his son screaming, not knowing if he was going to live or die, screaming to his father, "Daddy, I don't want to die." The most unimaginable, horrific thing that any parent could ever imagine became a reality due to the negligence of the defendants, and we're going to get justice for these families. And there's going to be the maximum extent of justice that we can get for them, because what was taken away from these children is priceless, and their families. The lawsuit alleges the defendants in the lawsuit is Continental Automotive Systems, which is where this facility occurred, as I stated earlier, Ford Motor Company, Detroit Area Pre-College Engineering Program, and the driver of this race car that Continental and the rest of the defendants put behind the wheel of this vehicle to endanger the lives of these children, Linus Gugino, who was a young man who, from all outward appearances, should never have been driving this a prototype super high powered vehicle, should have never been driving it at all, and certainly shouldn't have been driving it right next to a group of little kids that are placed next to a test track. It's mind-blowing that any one of these defendants thought that this was an acceptable way to run any type of program. We brought claims for negligence, gross negligence, negligent hiring, training, supervision, and retention of the driver and other individuals, premises liability claims, which for putting little kids next to a high-speed test track without any protection or guardrails or warnings whatsoever, ownership liability claims against Ford Motor Company, which owns the prototype and lent it to Continental on a bailment contract, a joint venture, and vicarious liability. With regards to the litigation, as you know, it was just filed. We plan on pursuing this in court. I'm going to have Mr. Gibson give a brief statement, and I got to go in the other room because I wanted to show you these records and these videos. But before I turn this over to Mr. Gibson, who's going to give a brief statement, and please respect the families. This is obviously very traumatic for them. So he's going to give a brief statement. But is there any questions that I can answer for the media based on what I've said this morning?
John, Amy Lang from Fox 2. Did you say that they deliberately had him lose control?
Yeah, if you listen to the video, they deliberately had him rev this engine up, and these cars are supposed to have stability control systems, okay? If you listen to the commentary on the video, they're talking about power going to the wheels. Any trained driver knows that doing what he did would cause it to lose control. And it appears that that was part of the thrill for them, that in order to put on a good show, because if you look at, and let me show you this video or this photo, Amy, that I had previously shown, if I can get that back up. But if you look at the original picture that I showed and that I attached, okay, and without pulling it back up, if you look at this picture, if you notice the marks on the ground, okay, you see this? So if you watch closely the video, on his first pass, the vehicle began to lose control and veer directly for these little kids that the defendants had placed right next to the track. And so they then instructed this driver to go do a second pass, but to go even faster. So on the first pass, he started to lose control, veer to the kids, if you watch it. And the kids are excited like any kid. They're little kids. They're told this is going to be fun. This is going to be a great experience. You're safe. Don't worry. You're safe. And if you look, it was very foreseeable because on the first pass, he started to lose control directly towards the kids. Then they had him do it again, go even faster, and either the stability control system did not work or they intentionally turned it off, which you can do on these systems. And we're going to find out because they haven't been giving us answers in order to make it more exciting so that the car would fishtail more and lose control. And that's what caused this to happen. It was very predictable because on the first pass, it almost happened. And then you go even faster without stability control systems able to do what they're supposed to do. That's exactly what caused this this crash. This was totally predictable what occurred here. Aside from this horrible idea of putting little kids next to a high-speed racetrack, they won't even let you do this in NASCAR. I go to a NASCAR show, or we go to the Grand Prix in downtown Detroit. They got fences up with cement barricades. They won't even let me as an adult come anywhere near close. And they're putting little kids next to this track. So yes, I hope that answers your question. Is there any other questions before we turn it over to the family? Okay, bear with me 1 second while I switch rooms, and you're going to hear from Mr. Gibson about this.
Good afternoon, everyone. Hate that we all have to be here today. July 17, 2023 was absolutely hands down the worst moment of my life, and I'm sure for all of our lives. What happened should never have happened. These kids were brought to have a day of fun, to learn about technology, to see what is possible for them in the future as careers, as engineers, that they could go wherever their mind would take them. They entrusted those people to instill it, to show them a good time, to show them what was possible, to show them what their future could look like, and their futures were almost taken from them. The lack of compassion, the lack of humanity that's been shown is an absolute disgrace. It's an absolute disgrace. This whole experience has been like a nightmare that we've been unable to wake up from. Those young men will never be the same. Our families will never be the same. And we just want them to do the right thing. And in the end, we will get justice for those children. And we don't want this to happen to anyone else. No parent, no family should ever have to go through this.